Yeah.
So I just started the broadcast. We're not doing any fancy intros today. It's just because this is just on my own LinkedIn and stuff like that. So hello everybody. If you're on today or if you're on the YouTube side, I'm not. The goal of this is really just to have this on a YouTube link somewhere. But I figured we would make it public if anybody wanted to jump on. And I forgot to actually even announce it on the Trino side, but just kind of a in public way that I wanted to start having a place that we can look at online for, we get a lot of these, like, let's see here, I'm going to just pull up my screen. In fact, hold on, do a screen share before I start going into my spiel. So, we'll get these pull requests coming into the things like, for instance, the Helm chart repo and trinodb, and right now we're kind of at a point where a lot of the maintainers have some kind of peripheral knowledge of Helm charts and things like that, but there's more advanced features like Ingress, right? Adding Ingress capabilities to the Trino chart to create an Ingress resource for Trino that is still kind of newer territory for maintainers, specifically on the project. And we don't really have anybody who's like a Helm expert at this point. And so that would be comfortable and just kind of coming in and doing all of these reviews. So a lot of what I've had conversations specifically with Ashar, and he's on PTO right now. So he will hopefully be able to join another one of these at another point. But we need kind of a larger amount of help from people, like relying on people that do have a more extensive background, and two of them are on here with me today. Corey, before we hop into all this stuff, Corey, why don't you kind of give a little background on your use of Trino and how you've used Helm charts and things like that, and specifically your visibility into like how Kubernetes has evolved in Trino since you started.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Corey. I'm the director of engineering at Blue Cat. We've used Trino for, I think 3 years at this point, maybe even longer. And since that, we started always in the cloud and always in Kubernetes. And it's kind of evolved. Like, we used to have a fork of the Trino chart from someone else in the community. And then we forked that because we couldn't get a pull request merged. And then I think at some point I probably messaged somewhere in Slack and said, I think we need to bring this together for a community chart, because, if you want it to evolve to push the community towards using it, you kind of need to bring it in-house. Yeah. The whole space has changed. Like, what used to just be applying YAML kind of directly to cluster, then you got Helm, which was like having a template way of generating these and then applying it, and Helm handles your upgrading and rollback and things like that. Yeah. But the Trino repo has now hit the spot of, hey, this is great. I run the Helm install, but now there's things I want to do after the fact. Yeah. And maybe the chart doesn't allow me to do that. Yeah. And that's when you end up with an explosion of pull requests. And then it's a balance of, do I merge this in because this could benefit the whole community and it makes sense? Or is this a one-off and someone's asking for something that's very particular that not everyone's going to face?
What are the best practices around implementing this feature is another kind of difficulty that we're facing right now with the chart. Because, it's one thing to kind of see like, this works, like, looks good to me, like I can run this. But like, there are also like, there's a lot of versioning. For instance, if you look at this particular PR, and Ingress has gone through multiple iterations. So even here, right, we're looking at one particular time of the Kube version, right, of Kubernetes version, where we're saying if you're before Kubernetes 1.18, use this annotation. And so it's like, is that the right thing? And so you have to kind of get into some of these, like, know some of the history here in terms of the Kubernetes outcomes. And that's where we're kind of less equipped on a maintainer side of Trino to actually be able to support this. So having people who know a lot of this stuff, a lot of the history and why you would have something in a certain way, and comment on, hey, this is this way because of this, and maybe give even, good links and references for the maintainers to make a good ideological decision on, is this a good approach or not, will at least get us closer to them feeling comfortable pushing the merge button, right? So that's just one, specific example, but there's a lot more nuance when you're getting into all these.
Even in this example, like if I look at the other charts, I don't think I've really come across the version compare almost ever.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you can't do it. It doesn't mean it's wrong. Typically what I've seen is it's on the Helm chart release version itself.
Yeah.
So when you are making the Helm chart and you will have a version and you'll have your version to this Helm chart, you will just specify in like a matrix table saying like, by the way, at this version of Helm is supported for Kubernetes 1.19. After that, we are no longer supporting it. And it's a trade-off of making it easy for everyone to use. But on the flip side, like where I am at Blue Cat, we're on AWS, and I think 1.18, you can't even deploy nor even have the cluster anymore. They auto upgrade.
So in your opinion, then, like, do you think that, like, in fact, let's put this is again a perfect observation, right? So we'll tag Asharg, and he's the maintainer that's been looking mostly over these charts, right? And so it said, should we consider only supporting? What would you say? Like, I think even 1.19 is kind of outdated, right?
Yeah, so, the last supported version, the oldest supported version is 1.23. So there's not a lot of them.
Yeah, greater than version. So really, actually, all of these we should just make kind of a draw line saying, because I think even if we look at the docs, right? Let's look at the Trino docs that I recently got out for Kubernetes, right? And in our Helm chart, the requirements, I just say supported versions. So supported versions of Kubernetes. And that's basically what we're relying on, is any version that's currently supported. So like you said, Jan, the last one is 1.23 right now, and that's expiring in February at the end of February, basically. So then it'll be just 1.24. So if we are making that authoritative stance, really technically, should we consider getting rid of this? Let me actually just go back to the point in the documentation and actually talk about requirements that we lay out. Should we get rid of anything that's not supported? Actually, that's not even go greater than anything that's not supported by Kubernetes. And then just link this requirements as per, we can even say as per the Trino documentation.
Not really the end of the world too, because it's like, so I'm facing this right now where I am, right? We have a cluster that's like 1.19 or 1.20, and we're on AWS, and they now have said like on this date automatically we'll upgrade to at least 1.21. So I don't have a choice. I kind of have to move. And on the flip side, for those who are running like bare metal, where they can run a much older cluster, let's say for whatever reason, it's just harder for them to upgrade. It takes longer. What they'll do is they'll just fork the chart at that point in time. And they will maintain a copy on their side. They won't get the new benefits of things being added, but they won't be left behind, or they can point to the Helm release version of the prior where this is still supported.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in general, we really shouldn't, in this particular case, probably it's not a good idea that we even have this. If this 1.18, if 1.19, if 1.14, like really, we should just basically have this else here. In fact, actually now, aren't we should be here, right? Greater than 1.19. So actually, this should just be the only one that we end up using.
Yep.
Only be using this API version from now.
Also, the deprecation window for APIs in Kubernetes is pretty wide. So even if you're using older Kubernetes versions, you should migrate to newer APIs. In general, like we should be using the latest APIs anyway. That's the best practice.
Yeah. Okay. See, and this is, and we already had like a couple people in the community come in and say, "Look, this looks good," because this is technically correct, right? Like what you were saying, Corey. Like this is technically something you can do, but then you bring somebody in who understands a lot of the kind of, well, how much backward compatible version support is there? You have to have a bit of that context of the kind of culture and like kind of support knowledge to actually understand what's a good decision or not, right? And so this will be this because Ashar is actually on PTO, probably sipping a mojito right now. But when he gets back, I'll actually be able to look at this review, this conversation we're having, and actually be able to make an informed decision. Whereas he, before he's busy doing a lot of other pull requests, and he has to actually go and look up and get the context himself. It's not as easy of a lift for those of you who are in the Kubernetes kind of community. You are doing these deployments constantly, and you kind of understand this. Oh, why are we actually supporting all this? So this is a perfect example of kind of how we need to start kind of supporting the maintainers on the review sides and giving more reviews. So anything to add to that, Corey or Jan?
Yeah, we can ask a different question here. Like, what kind of tests do we have for this chart? I mean, we have some workflows defined in this repository. Like, what's the Kubernetes version we're testing with, and if we don't have a test matrix, can we have one? Like, can we just test two versions, the latest one and the oldest one that's supported, and that would define the list of supported versions or the range of supported versions?
Yeah. So there's this idea that I've been coming up with recently as I'm building out a tutorials repo that actually is going to use. So my goal with this tutorials repo is to do what I did in a previous repo that I have on my own GitHub, which is using Docker Compose. And in Docker Compose, you have literally just one command, and it pulls this little like sandbox for you up. I want to be able to do this now with Kubernetes, but then like have that same like one command pulls up the world for you. And so I've looked into Terraform a little bit as one option for that. And I know Jan is the biggest fan of Terraform. I know it's his favorite open source tool ever, but
also Helm.
But it is the kind of current de facto way that people do a lot of this scaffolding around like tutorial stuff. So that's what I've been working on there. And I've also seen a lot of Terraform modules that also have testing for stuff like this. So you have modules that can pull up Helm charts for you, that does all of that, stuff for you. So you can do like one thing pull up, and then we can also have basically a one command that can be used as a driver in our tests to test these Helm charts out with different versions of all these things. So that makes it a very modular, testable thing that you can reproduce over and over again. So that's actually something that I'm personally looking into, that I want to start contributing to this myself. But that's it's something I'm doing on my free time, and that would be an interesting thing that if we do come up with a way that we can get all of the maintainers to kind of agree upon a kind of like standard around Terraform or whatever other thing we like, kind of tooling we want to use, then let's do that, and then try to maybe use that as a testing framework that could eventually do this automatically for us, right? That would also be yet another lowering the kind of barrier to entry for these reviews.
You used a keyword, testing framework. I'm pretty sure some exist already, so we shouldn't be inventing our own.
Fair enough. And I guess, we can also look into that. So, I mean, if anybody who's watching this is has a very awesome testing framework or anything you suggest, talk to us on the Slack channel if you're there already. If not, go to trino.io/Slack and join us. And then just let's figure out a cool testing framework that already exists, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But maybe Terraform already has like some plugin, or somebody already has a cool way to use this. Again, if we're using it for something else already. But again, I know Jan is going to try to figure out any way we can avoid using Terraform. So,
well, you're in luck then. This is a great little mini segue. So this whole space is changing. If you zoom out from Trino, you go one step even further back of like deployment, and we're talking about Terraform and Helm. It is somewhat changing, at least what I'm seeing. Like you have I'll name off some things. You have Crossplane, you have Pulumi, and then even k8s, and they're all somewhat different and depends on what you're doing. But more this programmatical way of writing your infrastructure. Okay. Like even the example you just gave, Brian, I could use something like k8s which is essentially just
What's that?
I
How
can
do
write
I go to that?
cd and then k8s.io.
K8s.
Or I could have probably presented, but anyways.
K8s, like
K8.
Kubernetes.
Oh, okay, got it. K8s. CD.
Yeah, exactly. So even the GIF gives you an idea. Like on the left side, they're typing code, and that's producing the YAML output that you would apply to your Kubernetes cluster.
Okay.
And the nice thing about this, especially in the example you're giving, is we're talking about testing. Well, in the example, it's TypeScript. There's tons of test frameworks there.
For TypeScript,
so
right?
I don't need to reinvent something. What I'm doing is just using existing test framework and then making sure that my expected output is matching what is produced by the YAML file. This was nice because what we had talked beforehand in Slack is this is what I'm using to do things with the Trino chart that's not exposed in the Trino chart. Because the issue I have with Helm is, as an example in Trino chart, annotations isn't exposed in the Trino chart, in the Helm Trino chart. That means I can't pass in annotations unless I use like the Helm post hook effect, which means Helm runs, makes a template, takes all the values I gave it, and then customize, which is another binary, can be ran after the fact to inject into the YAML. But now I can do it in code. So now I can just make a new object of Helm with Trino that will produce the same thing. But now in code, I can just say, by the way, add this in the YAML. I want to add annotations. What?
It's all just like handled under you're interfacing with it from one perspective, and you're not having to touch it like in Helm and in the customize separately.
Yeah. And the other thing is like the real life example I can give you where I am is we will write these as actual packages because you're in the code world. So npm install BlueCat internal CDK8 annotation. And that means anyone in my company who's using Helm can pull in that package with their after their Helm chart and just run an object, and that will add all of our internal annotation into that chart. So then internally at the company, we use those annotations for security scans, conforming to certain policies. In AWS, you need to use the annotations to say, how is the load balancer exposed? Is it NLB? Is it ALB? Should be an internal facing one, an external. That's all annotation. And today on the Trino chart, because we don't actually put the annotation in the metadata, you can't pass that in through the normal Helm way. You have to use customize to inject it. And it's not a bad thing. But then what happens in the community is the charts are everything and anything with variable inputs.
It's just another layer of abstraction.
Exactly. It's a maintainer nightmare.
Often unnecessary.
Gotcha. So, Jan, what are your impressions of using a framework like this?
Yeah, it's all good. I mean, it's structured and it has APIs, so it's you can create more robust solutions using this. Like the language can enforce to do better error checking and stuff like this. So like it's if you like without this, you'd basically use Bash to program in it, and often you would just not do any error checking at all.
So this essentially, I'm guessing there will be some framework around this, or does CDK8s also add some layer of like you can actually spin this up and actually test like different states or different expectations that you have in the running instance are there?
So this doesn't actually do what Helm does. Helm, for most people, they're thinking Helm install and Helm upgrade, which is the actual output applied. This is what would be equivalent to the Helm template, which is generate the output, do not apply to the cluster. So CDKs will generate out the template and then allow you to manipulate it, and then it gives you the YAML. The next step the user does in their pipeline is take the YAML, apply to their cluster. And that's where you would be able to do things like your test suite has already passed. Your test suite is making sure that the YAML is valid to what you expect. It doesn't mean that will actually work on that Kubernetes version. Because you could say this is a valid YAML spec, for 1.20, not necessarily 1.25.
Yeah.
I don't know if CD-K8s actually has a test framework to precisely say, like, by the way, validate on this version of Kubernetes.
Yeah, that's what I like in an ideal world. I was always hoping you already had something y'all are using at BlueCat to like do that testing.
The easy thing there is just CI/CD matrix.
Mm-hmm.
So on our GitLab pipeline, we just specify different clusters, and then we'll just deploy. And if everything comes up healthy, we say yes.
Okay, got it.
So, and then you would know, like, hey, this passes all the versions. And earlier in your pipeline, you would know that this is actually producing valid YAML.
Yeah.
Right? Like that your expectations of like labels or your expectation of it defining a load balancer is correct. But like I said, if it could be valid YAML based off of what? You could write in your test that like, I expect this for this version to be this, blah, blah, but then this could be a nightmare. I don't go that far. I just say, I just want to make sure that what is there in the YAML is valid to what generally I expect. And then the next step is deploy the cluster and make sure it works on the version. And that's good enough for me.
Yeah. That's and we can at least write, like, if you're changing, like ideally we have something that validates that you're using this API version for example. You could do that just by validating the syntax that's generated, right? Under all the different, it's kind of like unit testing for your Helm chart, but so kind of having that, or at least unit testing for your your actual YAML files in the end. So that's interesting, and definitely one step. But I'm hoping that we, from a Trino perspective, we don't just have like clusters running all over the place. So we would essentially want to be testing for a hypothetical set of clusters, and until we have just money in the Trino software.
So have you checked the current workflow in this repository? I took a look when we were talking about the test matrix. It's so this is a public repository. It's using public GitHub action workers.
Okay.
The current workflow has a step that's using the kind action to provision a kind cluster.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it just starts an ephemeral Kubernetes cluster, probably the latest version, right on the worker. So if like it's super easy to add a test matrix here just to test the different versions of Kubernetes. There's probably an option to the kind action. That was above in the test job.
Okay, here.
Yeah, this one. So you have like kind action. It probably has an option to specify the Kubernetes version. So we just need to put this into a test matrix, and it would run those jobs. Like it would start running multiple jobs in parallel. This repository has so little traffic that like there's no queue. So like we wouldn't even notice. We would just start testing multiple versions.
Yeah. Let me see version. The kind version to use.
Nice. This is kind version, not Kubernetes version.
Yeah, kubectl version there. A cluster name. Isn't there one actually that you would use? Or
it's one of those options. I mean, maybe node image. Maybe the Kubernetes version is embedded in the node image.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, interesting. All right. So maybe that's something else we can look into in terms of getting actual. But then there's actually still the thing that actually, I guess at this point, Mian, you would say let's do a bash script, right? Not Terraform.
I mean, you don't even need to write any scripts here. Here we would use GitHub Actions. Like there are so few commands to run here. They're wrapped in GitHub Actions, and you can use that. The whole point of this is to like when you're using kind, you're using a pretty vanilla Kubernetes without any extensions and without any cloud-specific controllers. It's actually good because like this is. It's a higher chance that more people will be using similar clusters, right? And it's so easy. Like kind stands for Kubernetes in Docker, so it just runs. You run a Kubernetes node as a Docker container. it's historically it comes from Docker in Docker because you're basically running a Kubernetes node in a container which runs additional, like all the containers that Kubernetes is managing are running also in this container. So you have containers in containers for people who like containers a lot.
Yes.
But like it's you're running a vanilla Kubernetes and it's super easy to provision, and it stands up really fast. Like it bootstraps really fast, and it's perfect for testing. So yeah, you don't need any tool to manage this. This is a single command to run, and here we have this wrapped in an action.
Okay. Yeah, it's just I think GitHub calls it like jobs, and we just set up a matrix.
Okay.
So then in your matrix, you would just list out the different versions you want. That's going to be called kind, with different node images or whatever you have to specify as your option. And then it will just basically run a matrix. Run this pipeline, whatever you want. Twice the oldest and newest version, or 5 times the oldest and the next version 5 times.
Nice. Okay.
All the CI passes. Yay. We know it works on all those versions.
Cool things that I'm learning about the CI/CD stuff since I've been out.
So I see we have a step. So we use a tool called chart testing. It's a pretty well-known tool for testing Helm charts. I assume it's gonna deploy the chart and see if it's deployed successfully. We probably could add another assertion there just to see if Trino is actually running, and you can execute queries on it
or something, or whatever port it's on.
I mean, yeah. So like if you deploy this, it's probably starting up, but it would be nice to see if you can actually run queries on it.
Yeah.
Also, there can be some misconfiguration preventing this, and that would be a complete test. So yeah, it's pretty good, but we can do some small improvements here.
Awesome.
I don't even know if we want to actually need the ability to run the query against it, just because the probes would catch. Like if the
it depends on the probes. I don't remember what kind of probes we have.
It depends on the liveness and readiness probes, and if we actually hit an endpoint that says truly everything's functional. Because for me, I would rather try and get the probes more in line than to get the cluster up, say everything is good according to the cluster, but let me double check and actually submit something, because like the whole point of those probes is to actually say that it's functional.
It's like an assert runtime.
Yeah, so the probes check the info endpoint in the API, so they're not actually executing queries. They're probing the HTTP API of Trino. I mean, it's probably enough. That would be a separate discussion, how to write a good probe. Let's not go into there right now.
Yeah. Let's try to real fast, so we don't run out of time for this, let's try to really quickly jump into the rest of this review so that we can give something else to Shar, as I think there's a lot of people that really want this Ingress Trino chart. And I think that it's something that we could really use so that we can set up these setups. And plus, the other thing is that I want people to get the feeling that there is a lot of investment or desire for investment to go into this. It really just comes down to getting the context and knowledge for people that are able to actually push the merge button to feel comfortable with that. So if we look in here, and let me just zoom in real fast so that it's a little more legible for everybody. This is just docs. So let's look at if we're wrapping the entire thing with Ingress enabled, which is good. If we don't enable that, then is that I'm wondering in Helm though, if this you would just create an empty Ingress file, is that?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you would have a file without any YAML document in it, so it would be just ignored.
Oh, okay. So Kubernetes knows to just pass that along, and you'll just have a blank file.
Yep.
Okay. So then, cool. Then Trino full name. This makes sense. Service port. This okay. And ultimately, where do we say service port? We probably use that down here. Where's this dot service? There we go. Service port. Okay. And that gets set. These are just some variables up here. Set by values.service.port. Cool. And then so this is where we start doing the comparison. We've already basically said that we should remove this in favor of just supporting the non-beta version of the Ingress. So that's good. That's the latest version, and there's nothing else that we would have to support. And we also do some more checking here. Wait, no, this is also the same thing. Okay. API version. We should not have this be the else, right? This should just, ultimately just get rid of this, all of this, and just have that API version be the one, right? Does everybody kind of agree on that?
Yep.
Okay. Kind Ingress, well, yes. And then
only comment, because I don't recall offhand, is extension /v1 beta 1 actually might not even be beta 1 since this pull request. I don't know. We'd have to actually look.
So I recently looked into. Oh wait, I see. This is a different extension.
Yeah,
beta 1.
One is networking and one isn't. So because see, even here, it's like you have line 10. It's networking.
This is the oldest one, isn't it? Extensions /beta v1 beta 1. I thought this is the oldest.
Yeah, this is like a fallback for Kubernetes versions older than 1.14. So
yeah.
So then we just drop entirely. Actually, like all this is just drop, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just the networking.k8s.io.
Yeah. So really, it's just obviously. Oh, hey, look at this. Why not? This is Shar basically saying this. So, and then it says, "I will update this," and this hasn't happened yet. So we got to push back on.
Because I think everything else in this pull request is fine. It's just taking opinion of the version, like a stance on the versioning.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything else that, like, when I looked at the example and the values YAML, that I was like, oh, this is totally not going to work, or like, we don't allow passing in like TLS or something. Like, I didn't see anything like that.
Yeah. So from this point on, this is pretty like boiler. So and again, this is something that most, I would say, even of the people who are even kind of familiar, like at least that have messed with Ingress a little bit, this is pretty boilerplate. Like you're setting the name, labels, and annotations that they might want to put on these too.
Yeah, and the metadata should be consistent with all the other resources that we have in this chart. I would expect to see the same metadata in other resources too.
Okay. Is there a way to? I wonder if there's a way to like make that like a single template versus.
Yes. You can import it or include it.
Yeah. So maybe that's another step that we should look at.
But this is out of scope of this PR.
Out of scope of this particular PR. Yeah. Let's just keep to that. And then this is another one of those times where it's like, so you would either do this or have the annotations name. They used to have this as an annotation, and now they later on made this. This should be the default. So this should not. This should be the default. Now that we're asserting Kubernetes greater than equal to 1.23. Okay, and then we also support TLS, which is cool. So then we're, if this is, if we're doing TLS, add that. Otherwise, we're doing it, is this a whole separate rules? No, TLS is the top level, right? Hold on, spec, ingress, TLS. I'm forgetting the levels, but.
I don't think there's anything else. I think if you define it, you're doing it. If you don't define it, you're not doing it.
Okay.
Right? I think so. Like when you scrolled, I see it only one. There's no else. If values.ingress.tls, we do the TLS block, and that's it.
Yeah. So if you're not doing TLS, then wouldn't we want there to be an option to run a non-TLS?
That's the default behavior, I believe. Like if you don't specify your TLS block, you're fine.
TLS, like if you don't have a TLS, but you're still specifying HTTPS service, it's at least the Nginx Ingress controller would fall back to using a default certificate if it's configured. If not, it's going to be using a self-signed fake certificate. That's how they call this. It's not really fake. It's just self-signed, and it's generated on startup. but there is a fallback certificate also.
I see. Okay, so because I didn't do I haven't done the TLS setup myself yet. So I thought for some reason I thought this was like somehow embedded in TLS when I first saw it. The syntax also, but no, it's at the same level as rules here. So that was where my confusion was. I thought that. Okay, now it makes sense. Okay, cool. Right. Yeah, the rest of this looks pretty good to me. And then in terms of the defaults, we're saying that Ingress by default is just not enabled. So you would just probably want to, and then they have a couple like examples. Now here, this example, Ingress class, we would again want to update this to be not utilizing the annotations, right? This would want to be using, instead of annotations, you'd want to use this Ingress class name. Is that right, Jan or Corey? I think this is the thing that got replaced from an old annotation.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That was used in older versions. I'll just put, let's see.
I believe so.
Let me see. Let me just search.
Yes.
That is the case? Can you send me that link?
I'm checking docs for the Nginx Ingress controller.
Okay.
And that they have an Ingress class name, so I'm just assume that's for the latest version. And the document is for Kubernetes newer than 1.19. So yeah, all the latest versions, all the supported versions.
So all supported versions use. Besides, this is a comment anyways, but I just don't want it to. I don't want it to indicate to people that they should potentially use an annotation because that's no longer. So.
I did add a small comment up above on the PR, which was just what we said was out of scope on this PR, which was, can we move the common labels to a template helper?
Yeah, very good. And Trino.example. Feel like, yeah, I say Trino.example is fine. It's really, all this stuff should just, once this is enabled false, none of this will populate anyways. Implementation specific. Okay. Any issues with these like default values?
I just have a nitpick that I wouldn't use example values that are not commented. So like if you just turn enable to true and leave the Trino example comments, obviously not going to work. And like if you're not very experienced with Kubernetes, that might be surprising.
Yeah.
I would just comment out the host section, leave it as an example, maybe with a comment pointing out to actually that you have to change the host value.
Okay. Make this.
But this is a nitpick.
Yeah, here, let me see. Let's actually just do a suggest right here.
Mm-hmm. You can select multiple lines and make a suggestion for the whole host block.
Let's do that. And suggest. No.
So you can leave host. Oh, wait. So no, if you would leave host, you would have to leave an empty value there for it to be valid. Yeah. So that you can do this like this. But then we would have to check. Like we don't support this case. We don't support not having any hosts defined. So you do have to leave the host uncommented with an empty list, and just leave an example entry as a comment.
But that's not so bad. Usually I see like people just comment out the entire...
No, don't type what I just said. It was for you.
Oh. I thought you were... I was literally going verbatim on what you were saying.
Yes.
What I've seen is like most of that Ingress section entirely is just commented out because the parser is going to check the value is not set. It's false. It skips over. It doesn't need any input. And then if you... are configuring this and you're looking for Ingress, you know, like that whole commented out section, uncomment, replace defaults, kind of. That's the process that usually people have gone through.
So do you think just removing it entirely makes more sense?
I wouldn't remove it from the values.yaml because you want someone to see that the possibilities there, but commenting out the entire thing.
What about just adding this localhost? Because everybody will get localhost is
No, localhost is invalid. I mean, you wouldn't use that in a real scenario.
I was just to say that they would get that they would need.
It's a bad example, and again, if someone's not very familiar with this, it would throw them off.
Okay. But just keeping it totally.
Docs or README, like there's multiple different approaches. Like I don't know if someone's actually going to like know enough to how to enable the ingress and not realize like I actually have to set values.
If you're asking yourself a question, if users will do something, they will do this.
but it's the leap of knowing even to enable it, like them knowing the unknown to enable the ingress to actually
let's not turn this into some bike shedding, but I mean that's the problem with Helm, like that we're basically figuring out how to create a new API right now, which is usually very hard, and we're just creating a new layer of abstraction over an Ingress resource. Kubernetes already handles how you create resources, and it does that, in a pretty good way with all the validation, and it makes it as easy as possible for you. So like, let's maybe not, we don't have to go into there right now.
Okay.
I can suggest something later for this.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to finish the review, and I'm going to just put some request changes.
Request changes is a really hard statement.
A comment.
I mean, not if you're not a maintainer. That's fine then.
Yeah, I'm just saying that way there's a view that we need to get something done. Let's say see few nits. Let's say a few issues or a few updates.
Well, if you're marking request changes, you should address this first. Like, what's the biggest? Is there a blocker in this PR?
Yeah, I mean,
because request changes means you're not comfortable with merging this at all.
Yeah. Sorry, I just pulled up the YouTube channel. I'm going to actually put this as the where to find the review that we're doing. So come back to find the review we did here. So I think the biggest thing is let me see. So we should just say we should avoid the supporting any version outside of the Kubernetes. I'm just going to get k8s, gosh. Support support window. See more info here, and then we'll just have the YouTube there. All right, submit that review. So cool, we got this. So hopefully, anybody who's kind of checking this out will get kind of an idea of like some of the things to consider when you're looking at a review. I think a lot of the confusion comes around for people when they want a feature really bad, for one. So you'll go and you'll see, okay, let me just, I assume that people do the due diligence of kind of pulling the repo down, maybe running it, and maybe you don't, but or maybe you're good at static analysis, so you can kind of see what's going to happen. But I think that there's a good amount of people that will pull it down. They'll check with their use case, which is good, a good start, anyways. And they don't really think about this holistically. They don't think about it from the what does this mean from the Trino perspective, right? What does Trino say they support, and all of these things, and then does it make sense that we support these versions as one specific example that we're honing in here now? But having this kind of thought process is what really helps out, and bringing in your context that you have from Helm charts and Kubernetes ecosystem and this type of thing will really, I think, benefit the project. And so if you're wanting to know, like, hey, how do I go in and do a good code review? These are just kind of some of the examples, and we're going to start trying to do more of these in these kind of Trino Tuesday installments that I'm going to do from time to time. Nothing very fancy, just literally, showing you how to review by doing a review in real time.
Also, like all of you just said, and things we said during this stream, this should be in the contributing MD doc in the repository. So like, because those are not obvious things, people that would like to contribute to this Helm chart should be able to find out what are the rules easily. So usually you just put things like this in the contributing MD file.
Yeah.
We have one for Trino. Maybe we could just have a reference for the same file.
Yeah, I think I mean, we need to get better at that in general, but I also think having like so kind of getting the things that people feel like they're missing, pulling that out into that file will be a good step, as well as just still having like kind of these watching. I think it's good to kind of when we're able to watch other people do things, we kind of are able to parrot it a little bit, like, oh, okay, this is how I do a good review, or a decent review at least. I don't think we're doing a great review, but
Well, the other thing I was going to say on this is, I don't know how much both of you use, like, are in the Kubernetes space. I as a user can particularly tell you the pain of why this PR is so important. Is like, I can't use this. Like, certain companies will say the only way you could talk to another service is through the Ingress controller.
Yeah.
If I Helm install this, I can't use it unless I fork the repo or I install the Helm stuff and then add the Ingress on top. And I think I even saw it in the PR. Someone literally said, I wanted to use this, but then I didn't use it because there's no Ingress. And that stuff is like, the day-to-day usage is really important. Like, if you're using Datadog, a lot of companies, the Ingress controller is where the agent runs to see all network topology. So the company says you need to go through the Ingress controller to be able to have the tracing and visibility. If you can't define the Ingress, you're like, cool chart, bro. Yeah. Looks really interesting. Either I maintain, and the worst is you could say, well, the user can fork and maintain and add. Yeah, but then they're not contributing upstream. And they're not getting the new benefits. Like, they're stuck in like a fixed point of time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So and we recognize that too. That's the whole point. I'm trying to make this a little more like, there's two deadlocks right now, right? And so if you're coming from the person outside wanting to use this, you're seeing that there's not a lot of activity going on in the Helm chart, and you're wondering, oh, the community just must not be very involved with this, or the maintainers just don't care. That's not the case. It's usually really comes down to, I don't know enough. And like, anytime a maintainer is pushing the merge button, they're literally like all these like corner cases that are going through their minds, and all of these other potential things that could go wrong. That they're like, that it's a wide impact anytime you bring new code into there. It's not just enabling you, it's enabling you and then like potentially breaking other things, right? So this is the kind of dilemma that maintainers always find themselves in when they're trying to push that button on so they giving the maintainers a level of support and kind of, because this really gets into something that's not the forte of a Trino maintainer, right? You're not the requirement to be a Trino maintainer doesn't necessarily involve like having a Kubernetes background, right? And so this is where where we're currently at, and ideally we'll get people at some point to do that. But in the meantime, we really need help from the community to kind of step in and give not just a LGTM, yeah, I ran on my machine kind of review. Like, we'll have to kind of give more thoughtful, provide links, give context as to why doing this version check is a good or a bad idea, or why this default value is a good or a bad idea, and start making your points there. And that's really what's going to push getting these PRs out a lot faster, and it's a little less of a maintainer just kind of blindly feeling like, okay, I know people kind of said LGTM, so I'm just going to merge. We don't want to have that in the Trino community either. Kind of this complacency. So it's this balance of making sure things move forward. And so hopefully this helps a lot of people. And I'm going to be posting this in there in our Trino Slack channels, and share this with anybody who does know Trino very well, or Trino and Kubernetes very well, to kind of give them more context into here's how you provide a good review in the open source. And we're going to try to do a couple more of these to kind of get even more kind of higher level stuff. And then what Jan suggested as well, make it also very concrete and clear. Here's some very clear list of steps to follow when you're doing this, because we need to improve and implement that as well. So cool. So we have like 11 minutes left. Do you guys want to just chat about other things that we were talking about beforehand? Like, Corey, what are so Ingress is one thing that we talked about a lot today, because we were diving into PR 339 here for charts. But like, what other things are you like? Is Ingress kind of like the last big one that we need to get in, or is there anything else that's like, like, God, I wish they just merged this freaking thing?
The other stuff is more around like both projects, like because the chart is particular to Helm, but what we're really talking about is deployment on Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Like Helm just happens to be the mechanism of applying that.
Okay.
It's more like better graceful worker shutdown, having the better probe so the cluster is more aware of it. We talked before about as the worker is, because in my world, let's say I'm using like some spot instances, I get notified when I'm going to evict a worker.
Yeah.
I would like to have that worker stop and then push off its current state to another worker. Like the tolerance stuff we're using today is just how far was I in that stage? And like, if I was 90% done, I know the worker's going to stop and die. I would like the worker to try and move to another worker, like its current spot, versus if not, I have to go all the way back to checkpoint. I know that's not Helm, but
there is a pull request open in Trino where there's a lengthy discussion about this, and it's really interesting because there are some good arguments brought up there, like why this is more complex than some people think. There are some caveats to that. And someone came up with a suggested solution, and we're kind of like rejecting the solution because it wouldn't work in all cases. I'm trying to figure out like if all or most is a correct word to use here. I mean, it's a really interesting discussion. I can try to find it.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. The other thing on the Helm chart and also repo itself, like the Trino, is dealing with dynamic values. Like, hey, not all my workers are necessarily going to look exactly the same. Like some of them, I would like to have a node group and spin up these workers with 64 gigs, and some are going to be 32. Because for me, there's a pool of resources. I might not always be able to spin up a heavy duty 512 gig RAM worker because I don't have the available capacity, but I might be able to spin up one worker on a smaller amount. But I think today that's not really feasible with the Helm chart. I think they're all static. Or even things like, well, when the worker comes up, instead of me passing in the values through the Helm chart, it should just ask the system what is the current available resources and work off of that.
Okay. These are all really good tips too. I think thinking through, like, I really hope that we can actually get this to a point too, where it's like we do have a lot of these more kind of what's been come to expect from at least a Helm chart and more dynamic values, like you're saying. Getting back to the graceful shutdown you were talking about, it looks like Jan linked me to this PR, which is 15180. And so, I mean, Jan, you've done a review here already. What are your thoughts on this?
Sorry, I think I just left a one nitpick comment here, and there's like some comments from Ashar and David with some really good points.
Okay. So is this something that ultimately looks like that ultimately like we're looking at into, or is this? Because I know we've looked at these in the past, and I think some of them got. Oh no, these are issues. But I know there was like a PR in the past that like there was an implementation that somebody didn't agree with. Is this one?
That might be another example of this.
I think there was one from the Lyft team, if I recall.
Yeah. And then it was something about like how much the coordinator had to know versus, yeah. Okay, now I remember that one going away. Now is this one another way to do it?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh wait, this was the one that we were talking about. This is, yeah, this is the one that got that the Lyft team was trying to do.
And it's closed. So.
And it's closed now. So
it's a nice thread to follow, to see different sides of the same like of the problem and how the problem is bigger than you think it is.
Yeah,
that happens a lot.
Like we've I know in Slack I had mentioned at some point, I think in the project what is it, project tardigrade? Yeah. Like the way, and I'm only one persona of a user, right? You're dealing with many different personas, people with bare metal, people in cloud, not in the cloud, a hybrid. You know, for my persona of being in the cloud, you have to realize that I might go from no available resources for Trino to seeing a query show up and then having what, 50 available workers ready. And that could be moving up and down based off of like the auto scalers, how many spot instances are available, have I got evicted on a spot instance? Like this stuff is like hyper dynamic. It's not like your normal cluster where you've kind of provisioned and allocated resource.
Yeah.
Because you know that's a bunch of stuff. Like the Helm chart will evolve based off of what the code is doing. The code will evolve, I think, on the more users who are using this and come in with more cases like, hey, I'm using Fargate.
Yeah.
Like if Trino was able to just spin up pods or tell a scheduler to spin up pods for the work, I'll just keep scaling up indefinitely. As the queries come in, I'll just keep scaling up. As long as AWS replies on the API, I'm good.
Yeah.
And you'll have people who are just provision static or mostly static. One small thing, which isn't related to that tangent, but I will say a takeaway is probably that we would like to look for a different probe. Like the liveness probe and the readiness probes aren't actually even the same thing. But I noticed they call the same path, which usually means we have a problem. Because one is, are you up? And the other is, are you ready to receive a query? And those are very different things. It might just be that the liveness probe v1 info is really actually a readiness probe. We don't actually reply on the v1 info until the whole engine's up. I don't know what the code is, but.
See, so let me just quickly hop into where this is that you're talking about so that people can kind of see what we're meaning with liveness probes.
Oh, it's another example of a complex problem. Does readiness means that the coordinator is able to? I guess it can take a query and it can queue it because maybe some of your connectors are not ready yet. I don't know.
Yeah, it is much more, as you know, complicated. Like, what is ready? Is it just the coordinator is willing to accept? Is it that all the connectors have passed? Like, where's?
We can probably should just check out like a few different database systems, how they deal with this. For example, one concern might be maybe you don't want to run queries, like actually execute queries as part of the readiness probe because they're going to leave like traces in logs, audit logs, or generate events. If you have an event listener that stores events, like query completed events, maybe you don't want to populate it with those readiness probe queries.
And I guess the same thing for the workers as well, because I know they actually are the same liveness and readiness probe, which opens, as you guys both know, working on the project, it's not an easy answer. There is a lot of edge cases. There's a lot of subjective. Should we wait for all the connectors to come out? Do we wait for one of the connectors to come out? Like, what is really ready? But I know on my side, it raises a flag looking at the chart when they both go the same path, because it's like they do different things. Now, what is ready is subjective, but it is not the same thing as live.
Yeah. Yeah, let me see. So we had a couple comments from Evo. So yeah, for this use case, you definitely need a dedicated control plane service. Oh, this was talking about before. We were talking about when we're deploying across multiple, I guess, variants of Trino. And then this one was the one he just says, yeah, you need to do complete E2E probes. I'm wondering, there is the one in I think is it Docker, that as soon as you see the server started in the log, I know that's a pretty like that would be my definition for the most part of what ready is in Trino land, anyways.
A while ago, I added a health check in the Docker container in the Docker image for Trino. So it's I'm not sure if a lot of people is using that, but right now, if you start the Trino container in Docker, if you do a Docker PS, you can actually see if it's starting healthy or unhealthy.
So that's all based off those logs, or is that doing something else?
No, I mean, it's doing a request to, I don't remember which endpoint. It might be v1 info. Okay. So it's not the best health check, but it's more than just grabbing logs for server started. You can unfortunately, the Docker CLI command doesn't have anything to wait for this health check status.
Yeah.
And you start a container and you want to wait until it's ready. So you still have to do like a bash loop. But again, like probing, checking for the status in the Docker API is still better than just grabbing logs in a loop.
And I was going to say, on the k8s side, we could, if you need to wait, there's like a startup probe wait before you even try the liveness and readiness probe. So you could say, don't even check for the first 30 seconds because it's going to take 30 seconds for, I don't know, whatever you need, config file to be read, start up the actual JVM, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So you just give it basically an initial startup time to just avoid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you take over on the liveness and the readiness. And the main thing is like, why we care about the difference is like the readiness is I put you behind the load balancer and you need to be actually ready. The liveness, I'm looking at like, are you successfully starting up? Can I spin up another one on? Because in k8s Live, you might have an auto scaling group, which is saying how soon I want to scale up by 5 more.
Yeah.
I'm going to wait for the liveness probe to pass before I start spinning up others. So I don't have like a cascade of failures as I'm spinning up these.
Yeah.
And like that is very different from, hey, put in the load balancer, because one is scaling up the number of containers to come up for Trino, and the other is actually putting it into action behind the load balancer.
Yeah.
Anyways, I know we're at time, so.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to go way past anybody here, and I want to try to keep it roughly at an hour. So thanks for joining on the call today, Corey and Jan, for, we never got around to actually introducing you, Jan, but Jan, tell us your background real fast before we hop off and how you know about Helm and all this Kubernetes fun stuff.
I used to do a lot of Kubernetes work in my previous job. Right now, I'm working for Starburst Data. I used to work for F5 Networks and Nginx after they acquired Nginx. So we were building we utilized the Kubernetes as a platform. That was very cool. Like we were building on a service based on Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And Nginx has a Kubernetes Ingress.
Yeah.
There are actually 2 Nginx ingresses for Kubernetes. One, the open source one, and the one managed by Nginx, which is able to run Nginx Plus.
Which is the UI, right?
No, it's like Nginx with enterprise features.
Oh, gotcha.
And you need a license for it.
Got it. Cool. One last little comment from Evo, and then we'll hop off. So you have delays between probe checks, number of failed checks, and so forth. So plenty of config options. Yep. Oh man, yeah. It's getting into this world. It's of the kind of DevOps, right? It's like you start to really appreciate because we used to have just an ops section, and now developers are getting more and more expected to be able to do their own stuff, So anyways, it's really helpful to have these Helm charts and other kind of tooling around this, even though sometimes it can be kind of a bit of a pain. It's at the end of the day, getting this stuff merged and kind of getting the consensus around community driven version, I think, is the ultimate goal here. And so anyways, long story short, providing us any of your reviews, I think, is going to be a big part in getting these to come in faster, while we eventually wait on getting somebody who is and actually that's kind of a call out, right? If you're doing a lot of these and you end up taking a lot of the work, there's and you start to kind of fall into the main line of community and you become that person, it's very likely you could end up becoming the maintainer of and obviously when we have a maintainer come onto the project, it's a maintainer does multiple things, right? But having somebody who does have this background and does have this visibility would be the optimal way to kind of get yourself into that type of position, and having that extra ability to locate on that. So I don't know, Jan, were you going to say something?
I gotta go. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Talk to you later, Corey. Talk to you later, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.